What if your walls could speak, not in words, but in raw emotion, movement, and energy, transforming your space into a living masterpiece through modern abstract wall art? Picture this: a blank canvas standing silently in a softly lit studio, the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred. And as a modern abstract artist, I step into that space not just to paint, but to translate emotion into form, to give shape to something that cannot be spoken. And that is exactly what today's YouTube video is about. Modern abstract wall art, not as decoration, but as a living, breathing extension of thought, feeling, and movement. So as the camera slowly pans across textured surfaces and bold color fields, I begin by inviting you into my process, explaining that abstract art is not about replicating reality, but about distilling it, breaking it down into energy, rhythm, and contrast, where every brushstroke is intentional yet free, guided by instinct rather than strict rules. And as I mix pigments on my palette, letting unexpected color combinations emerge, I emphasize how modern abstract wall art thrives on contrast, soft against harsh, light against dark, chaos balanced by calm, and how these tensions are what create visual intrigue. I talk about the importance of scale, how a large canvas allows the body to move more freely, almost like a dance. And you'll notice in the footage how my entire arm participates in the act of painting, not just the wrist, because abstraction is physical, it's immersive, it demands presence. And as layers begin to build, I explain how depth is created not just through color, but through texture, through scraping, layering, sanding, and reapplying, each stage leaving behind a memory of what was there before. Like a conversation between past and present decisions. The camera zooms in on thick impasto sections where paint rises off the surface, catching light differently. And I describe how these textures invite the viewer to not just see the painting, but to feel it, almost as if their eyes can touch the surface. And then I shift into discussing color psychology, how certain hues evoke specific emotions. But in abstract art, those meanings are fluid. A deep blue might feel calm to one person and melancholic to another, and that ambiguity is not a flaw. It's the point. It allows the artwork to become personal, adaptable, alive in different contexts. As the composition evolves, I begin to introduce unexpected elements. Perhaps a bold line cutting across a soft gradient, or a sudden burst of metallic leaf catching the light. And I explain how disruption is essential in modern abstract wall art, because without it, the piece risks becoming predictable, and predictability is the enemy of engagement. So every mark is a decision to either support or challenge what already exists on the canvas. I pause occasionally, stepping back, evaluating, letting the painting speak back to me. And I share this crucial part of the process with the audience, reminding them that knowing when to stop is just as important as knowing when to act, because overworking a piece can suffocate its energy. And sometimes the most powerful statement is restraint. The video then transitions into a broader reflection on how modern abstract wall art fits into contemporary spaces, how it interacts with architecture, furniture, and light, becoming a focal point that anchors a room while also opening it up emotionally. And I talk about how collectors and viewers often look for something they can't quite explain, a resonance, a pull. And that is what abstract art offers, a connection beyond language. As I continue refining the piece, adding subtle details that might not be immediately noticeable but contribute to the overall harmony, I explain how these small decisions accumulate, how the layering of intention builds complexity, and how even the areas that seem empty are carefully considered, because negative space is not absence, it's breathing room. It's what allows the eye to rest and the composition to expand. The tone of the video becomes more introspective as I discuss the emotional aspect of creating abstract art, how it can be both meditative and intense, how it requires vulnerability, because you are not hiding behind representation, you are exposing raw perception, and that can feel risky, but it is also what makes the work authentic. As the painting nears completion, the camera captures the final adjustments, the last decisive marks that bring everything together. And I explain how a finished abstract piece doesn't necessarily answer questions. It invites them. It creates a dialogue between the artwork and the viewer, a space where interpretation is not just allowed, but encouraged. I then shift to addressing aspiring artists watching the video, encouraging them to let go of perfection, to embrace experimentation, to understand that mistakes are not failures, but opportunities for transformation. Because in abstract art, a mistake can become the most compelling part of the piece if you are willing to respond to it creatively. The final reveal shows the completed artwork mounted on a wall, interacting with its environment, and I talk about how seeing a piece in context can completely change its impact, how lighting, spacing, and surrounding elements can either amplify or diminish its presence. And I emphasize the importance of considering these factors when creating art intended for interior spaces. As the video begins to wrap up, I reflect on the journey from blank canvas to finished piece, highlighting that modern abstract wall art is not just about the end result, but about the process, the exploration, the willingness to engage with uncertainty. And I leave the audience with the idea that abstract art is not something to be understood in a traditional sense, but something to be experienced, to be felt, to be lived with. And as the camera fades out on the textured surface of the painting, catching the light in subtle shifts, I remind viewers that every piece of abstract art is a story without words, a visual language that speaks differently to everyone. And that is its greatest strength, its ability to connect across perspectives, emotions, and interpretations, making it not just art, but an ongoing conversation that continues long after the paint has dried.